What's up? It's Phil from Fit World Exposed. Today's episode, we have a very special guest, Chris Barnard. This guy doesn't need any introduction. He's a coach from the strength camp. Some of you guys may know him as Elliot's right-hand man, but he's a performance coach and he helps athletes worldwide, basketball, football, people who are really trying to get faster, just like improve their performance on the field, and I know that this channel is all about strength and body composition. You guys, that's what you guys come on this channel for, but you guys can still learn a lot from Chris Barnard. If you're a coach watching this, if you're just a lifter in general, there's a lot of useful information that we're going to go over. We're going to go over a lot of main lifts, how to teach them, how to correct certain imbalances, all that good stuff. So welcome.
Awesome, man. Phil, thank you for having me, man. I really appreciate being on and being able to share some value or some insight to your guys here.
Nice, bro. It's a pleasure to have you on the channel, man.
Thank you.
So it's going to be a blitz Q&A. Questions are in no particular order. We're just going to blast through them. So first things first, let's say you get like a fresh athlete comes to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Say it's like a football player. How do you like to teach like noobs how to squat?
How to squat. One thing that I commonly do is when they come into me, they go through what I call is my general assessment. Now, it's not like I plumb line assess them and measure every joint angle or anything like that. I actually just want to see them move. So they're already athletes. That's all I really work with is guys who are actually competing right now at this time. So they're already moving. Most of them come to me. If they have an injury, I know about it. So when they do a dynamic warm-up, I put them through a series of just primal movement patterns. Your bend, your squat, your gait, your lunge, your twist, push-pull, those kind of things as a warm-up. I can start to see how that athlete is moving already. And I say that because once we start to get to the compound movements, such as the squat, I can start to determine, okay, this athlete is hyper flexible or this athlete needs, his hips are extremely tight. And depending on where that athlete is at, I actually typically ask them if they've squatted before. And a lot of the guys that I'm working with now are either in the high school, college, or pro level. So I typically have them perform a body weight squat within the dynamic warm-up to then begin to see. And when I'm doing this, I'm not loading the spine. Right? So this is just as a body weight. So I want to be able to see their mechanics as is. Where if I just tell them, hey, give me 10 body weight squats, I show them myself do it, and then I analyze them do it. Right from there, from that movement alone, I'm able to start to see what this athlete is capable of. Mm-hmm. Once I have their capability, there's a couple things. And just to kind of make this pretty quick for you, the one takeaway that I have for most of my guys is I want them to be able to create torque out of their squat. And I want them to be able to produce as much power by utilizing and activating the glutes. I mean, the whole posterior chain is what we're really counting on here. That's what I'm trying to get to fire. So one of my biggest cues is to have them screw their feet into the ground. And I got this cue from Kelly Starrett from How to Become a Celebrity. I thought it was one of the most amazing cues. I used to tell guys, even through college, drive your knees out, that focusing on the glutes. But starting from the feet up, so starting from the ground going up to the hip, one cue that I give is screw your feet into the ground. So you're actually pressing the feet down and pushing out. And what will happen is you'll start to feel the hips automatically begin to activate.
Okay.
So that's one of the biggest things. I want to keep your chest upright, and I want you to screw your feet into the ground. And then I teach them obviously how to brace in the torso. Anytime you load the spine or have any kind of axial load, I want to be able to teach them how to brace. But other than that, I'm trying to put them immediately. I'm trying to put them in a situation where I can create the most stimulus to that posterior chain out of that hip extension, because that's really what we're looking for.
Okay. But would you, are you more of like a box squat guy or like free squat for beginners?
Oh, teaching. Okay, so from there, like I said, I won't load a spine until I see them do a body weight. Then once we start to gain up, I typically teach them how to reach the hamstrings back by performing some kind of a box squat. if there's somebody who has a pretty clean squat, it looks pretty good, I'll go right into a back squat. Like I said, it just depends on the level of the athlete. But there's not too many that like I said, if there's a case of somebody not, something's messed up or the mobility is really off or their stability is just horrendous, I'll move over to more of a box squat and go really lighter, teach them how to reach their hamstrings, their glutes back, be able to set themselves up to create that stimulus in the posterior chain. But if not, I mean, most of the time, a lot of the guys I work with, and even younger, I can begin to do some form of a regular squat or a goblet squat. If I have a real young athlete, I'll perform a lot of goblet squats. So I'll have them take a dumbbell or a kettlebell.
Yeah.
One, because obviously it's working the thoracic area for them to be able to keep that extension. And then two, they're actually performing, a squat. The beauty of where I'm at and what I'm doing, and when you say noobs, I should really focus on the noobs as opposed to the guys I'm working with. But the beauty of where I'm at, most of these guys are athletes. I work with mainly athletes. Even if they're before the high school, pre-high school level, majority of them can perform a squat. Now, some of them have caved arches. You'll see some other different imbalances, which then obviously start to work on individually. But for the most part, it goes body weight, goblet, box, back.
Okay. So let's talk about knee caving, right? And I know that, you talk to 10 different coaches, you're probably going to get some different answers, but I just want to know, your take on it. Say you're trying to teach the athlete how to squat, and you notice that their knees tend to cave in. What are some ways, some methods that you use to help correct this?
Yeah, so I think I answered this, but one thing I'll say that for a lot of you guys going for strength, if you look at some of the best Olympic lifters in the world, weightlifters who are actually on the elite level, you'll see a lot of them cave in slightly, and a lot of them preach that this is completely okay. From my stance, I got to make this very clear. From my stance, I'm trying to apply a certain stimulus to an athlete to transfer over to their sport. So I'm trying to make a basketball player stronger with a squat. Remember, the squat is just a tool for me to then make him jump faster or jump higher, run faster, whatever it is that I need them to perform in their sport. So I don't need them to be a weight room warrior. I need them to be able to create the most stress to that area to be able to transfer over to their sport. So for me, it's all about being able to, yes, activate the glutes when you're performing a squat. And like I said before, my biggest cue to them and my biggest thought process to them is to be able to create torque out of that hip extension by screwing your feet into the ground. And like I said, I kind of answered it on the last question, but that's my whole focus when I perform a squat from knees caving in. Now, if it's something to do with the arches, that's a different route. Which you definitely see a lot of flat feet people, that I work with, and they'll have ACL problems down the road, But a lot of the time, when you see the knees caving in, a majority of it is they're not able to activate. So what I'll do is I'll screw the feet into the ground. If that cue doesn't work, I'll actually utilize like a band, like an elastic band, and put it right above their knees. And have them focus on being able to get a little bit wider and driving that band out. So there's different progressions as far as avoiding that knee caving in. But for sure, I'll start with the feet, screwing them into the ground, and then I'll move to the elastic band right above the knee.
Okay, so that brings me to my next point. Let's talk tall athletes, because I'm sure you get athletes come in all shapes and sizes. You get some short ones. Probably get some 6'6" guys, they want to squat. And even myself, I've dealt with some guy from India, and he's 6'4", and it's a bit it's you can still make it work, but it's just trickier. Cause some of these tall guys, they like to lean a bit forward when they squat, does a bit of a good morning type thing. Do you recommend teach them pause squats, or what's your method to help them fix that good morning that they tend to have at the bottom, or stretches or whatever?
Yeah, so depending on that, there's a series of stretches that I'll typically do before I do a squat day anyway, just to kind of mobilize my guys, starting from when it comes to that, starting even as to the ankle, mobilizing the ankles, then we can move to really focusing on the hips, being able to mobilize. I really like things such as a couch stretch, a pigeon stretch, or a frog stretch. You guys can
Mm.
obviously Google those. Those are three that I absolutely love before I perform any kind of squat to allow them to get a little bit deeper into it. Going back to one of our previous questions, when I have an extremely tall guy, that's when I start to see I'll tend to move towards a box squat a little bit more. So then, I'm able to teach them how to kind of stay upright and produce force from that static position. As the mobility continues to increase, what I'll do is I'll have them start to introduce something like a goblet or a back squat then. So really I focus on the ankle flexion,
Mm.
and then, like I said, the couch, pigeon, and frog stretch to really kind of open those hips up. You can do a lot of foam rolling, whether that be on, you can take a lacrosse ball, put it on your TFL. You could put it on your hip flexors. You could put this on your glute medius, your piriformis. These are all things that you
Yeah.
could do to continue to loosen those hips up. But as that tall guy increases his mobility, while he's waiting on that, I might introduce a box squat first. It's hard to kind of put everybody into a pigeonhole and just kind of say this is exactly what I do, but
No, that's it. Yeah.
more than likely, when I get the tall guys, I tend to see myself moving towards a box squat a little bit higher, and then all of a sudden we start to decrease, and as that mobility increases, we can then start to introduce an axial load.
Okay. Okay, so let's talk about like tests, like the 225 test, stuff like that. What are some methods that you use to prepare your guys for something like the bench test,
Okay.
225?
Yeah, so to answer your question, you're referring to like in a combine setting,
Combine, yeah, like yeah.
25 as many reps as possible. One thing that I'll give you two methods that I absolutely love. Um, First of all, if you're going to train for this, you should be doing it twice a week. All right. Your first day, some guys, even if you get into the conjugate method, they preach three because they do repetitive method, they do a max effort, and then they do basically like kind of like a speed, which is your dynamic effort.
Yeah.
I usually like to do two in a week, and depending on what phase we're at or how much time we have, usually typically what I like to do is a strength on one day, because if your overall brute strength, absolute strength increases in your bench press, the 225 is naturally going to go up. You're not going to find a guy who benches 405 and can't bench press 225 for 15 plus
At
20.
least 20, yeah, for sure.
So it's just what it is. So I want to increase. When I'm doing this, however, I want to keep the volume low, the intensity high. So I might stay under, obviously, reps of 5 or 4, and I want to keep the working sets actually pretty minimal. So we want to build up, and then we want to say we hit like 3 sets. So it might be actually a working sets, like a 3 sets of 3.
Hmm.
Immediately after that, I'm going to perform. Number one thing I notice with 225 is it's the lockout. That's usually what guys miss. I mean, if you see it, look, it's a money test. So you're doing everything you can to get as many reps as you possibly can. There's no form or anything like that involved. So the guys are benching it, and they're bouncing it and they're going. So usually what happens is they lose it on the lockout. So
Hmm.
one thing that I'm trying to do when it comes to that is I want to hit board press. So I want to work that lockout a lot. Then on the Thursday, or the next day that I actually train the bench press, it's going to be what I would do like a bench press. I would say, hey, as little time as I possibly can, give me 30 reps or whatever goal we're shooting for. And if it takes 5 minutes the first week, the next week we're shooting for 4.5 minutes. If that makes
Okay, so
sense.
it's kind of like a rest pause type thing.
Rest, pause,
Get as
rest when
many with the
go into it.
225 in like 5 minutes.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay, I understand.
Gotcha.
Okay, that's a good method. Because there's so many different ways to go about it. That's what I
Uh-huh.
find interesting. But I think at the same time, it's more like there's a million ways to get there. I think people just have to like
Yeah.
pick one way and just stick with it, as opposed to being
Absolutely.
all over the place.
Yeah, the bench test, setting a set number that you want your goal on, and then being able to decrease that time every week, to me, is one of the most effective methods I've come across.
Okay, let's talk overhead pressing, right?
Yep.
Just pressing heavy weights overhead in general. Um, what are some cases where it's like, what are some tests as like, sorry, I'm kind of losing my words.
Mhm.
To dictate whether the athlete like should be pressing overhead or not, like due to like shoulder issues and stuff like that. Like, is there a test that you kind of put the person through to indicate like, hey, you shouldn't be pressing overhead or you should be?
Yeah.
Like the wall test or something, or like.
Yeah, I'll perform things like a wall slide, or I'll have them do something like some kind of Blackburns or some kind of shoulder mobility test to just see how internally rotated they are.
Mhm.
If they're severely internally rotated and I have a group of guys performing overhead press, I might have that guy perform some kind of a neutral grip with dumbbells as opposed to a strength because he's more or less performing a incline press because he simply is so tight. Usually,
Mhm.
typically, when I perform overhead press, I'm going to do a series of stretches with the guys anywhere where I'm working on the pec and the lats to be able to, lengthen those before we go ahead and press overhead so we can have a clear bar path. Um, but majority of the time, like I said, I do the mobilization and activation before we actually perform that compound movement. And if I see that person not being able to perform that correctly, I'll go ahead and then start to regress the movement. Like I said, I'll do some kind
Mhm.
of neutral grip where they can come overhead, and then I'll focus in between sets on opening up the lats, opening up the chest, and things of that nature.
Okay. Let's talk about let's talk about jumping now. Obviously, it's super important for athletes,
Hmm.
And what are like, and I know it's gonna vary from person to person, but like
Right.
just like generally speaking, what are like the top three like bang for your buck lifts in the weight room? So we're not
Hmm.
talking about like working on jumping technique. We're talking about like actual lifts, like jump squats and stuff like that, that actually help athletes jump higher. That you like to prescribe.
Yeah, so my three that I'll give you for just off the top of the head and in no particular order because it's how you apply it. I'll have to go with box squat, I'll have to go with trap bar deadlift, and I'll have to go with either some form of a conventional slash RDL deadlift. And as far as like compound movements, those to me are the three best. When I was going for my 44, the majority that I focused on was box squat, heavy, heavy, heavy box squat, and at a little bit higher than parallel, so right where
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was down, and trap bar deadlift. And for
With the
me,
high
those,
handle, of course, right?
yeah, yep, high handle, and I would even come off of a little bit of a lip off of boxes with that, and so I create a little bit higher angle for myself. So I really try to mimic very similar to the movement. Now, obviously, a vertical, and depending if you're going horizontal or vertical, but a lot of that, any kind of pulling off the ground or, for me, for the squat, I say box squat all day as opposed to regular back squat or front squat as far as jumping.
And I'm assuming that you would want them to box squat with the exact same stance they used to jump, right?
Yeah, so a lot of guys sometimes, especially when they get boxed, they like to get a little bit wider. Don't get me wrong, you're still going to apply that stimulus to your glutes, but I try to keep it as specific as
Specific,
possible. So
yeah.
I want your feet right underneath your hips,
And
and
what
that's
about
from.
sorry, what about the RDL? Like, do you recommend that they go like really low on them or like mid shin or what?
It depends. Sometimes I'll do something more like a demo deadlift where you're going with a little bit more speed, and I won't go highest range of motion. When I'm starting somebody off, if I need to go full range of motion, depending on their ability, my biggest thing is how far can you reach your glutes and hamstrings back? Because when I teach the RDL, it's not, hey, it is a bend pattern, but I'm not
Mhm.
asking you to go forward. I'm asking you to reach your glutes and hamstrings back. And by doing that, that's how you create that hinge. And by creating that hinge, we're applying stimulus to that posterior chain that's going to transfer over to your jump.
Perfect. So let me ask you the same question, but for sprinting.
Uh-huh.
Like, what are the top three like bang for your buck lifts that you recommend for someone who's really? I know I'm not really mentioning like what kind of sprint, but let's say a 40-yard dash, right?
Right.
Something like that.
You know, the biggest thing with the 40-yard dash, especially when you're being timed by something or anything sprinting, I always say focus on your acceleration phase. Top speed can obviously be corrected over time, but you got to think of top speed as like correcting somebody's motor patterns that they've developed over a long period of time. So if I were to take a baseball player who's played for 10 years and I try to change his swing, it would take me a long time to change his swing. It's not something that he would do naturally right off bat. Top speed is in the same mold. So top
Hmm.
speed is something we repetitively do once or twice a week where we're creating good motor patterns to be able to create that cycle within an athlete. But if you are pressed for time or you need to start somewhere, acceleration you can immediately start to change is what I noticed. And acceleration is how much force we can apply to the ground to basically overcoming. It's accelerating. It's how fast you can get. So if I can change somebody's stance, physics, all of that, in the first 10 yards, that's going to account for 2-3 yards faster when you're talking over the course of 40. In the weight room, my biggest thing is I want to be able to get as much force, generate as much force and strength from those particular muscles that are going to create it. So if you think about a sprint, it's actually a hyper hip extension. So you're actually coming slightly back. So when you get full hip extension in a sprint, your hip is actually hyperextending slightly. So you want to do exercises not only that are hip extension like your jump, but you actually want to create a slight hyperextension. So things such as like I'll manually resist some of my guys when they're on all fours and they're kicking their legs back. I'll manually resist them to be able to create that stimulus in the glute so they're hyperextending just slightly a little bit. If that makes sense.
No, I
So
understand.
those same drills, like I said, the squat, the trap bar deadlift, all those compound movements are amazing for that. Other ones that I like for sprinting are obviously going to be direct hamstring work, and then beyond that, it's certain movements that are going to create a hyper hip extension.
Okay. So what would be an example of that? For
Well,
that.
like I said, the one example would be the hyper hip extension. Sometimes I'll hook a band up to a certain a rack, and I'll have that guy
RDL, like.
you kind of put his foot in it, and he's standing. So what he's going to do is he's going to drive his drive his foot back, and then basically activating the glute. I hate to say it, but it's kind of like the kickbacks you see all these Instagram girls doing nowadays in the gym. When they hook their leg up to a
Yeah.
to a machine and do the kickbacks and stuff like that. It's actually really good for sprinters. So besides your compound movements, that's another one that I absolutely love.
With the band. You said.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly, with the resistance.
Okay. Interesting. So let's go right back to squatting.
Yep.
This applies a bit to the lifters. You look at guys like West Side, or you just look at a lot of power lifters in general who
Hmm.
are really trying to improve their squat and stuff of that nature. And you tend to see some power lifters, not all of them, tend to include some jumps into their training.
Yeah.
Now, what's your take on doing like something like these plyo jumps, these box jumps and stuff like that, like prior to squatting, or just to have it like somewhere in the program? Do you use it with your athletes, who want to become better squatters, or what's your take on it in general?
Yeah, so I think there's a plethora of benefits that are associated with if you're referring to having somebody perform some jump training and then transfer that over to their squats and their power. I mean, there's a reason why some of the best guys, and you see West Side, there's a reason why they have dynamic effort in their programming. They understand the benefits of training that stretch shortening cycle, training that speed. Because when you're performing, let's say in powerlifting, you're moving that bar as fast as you possibly can once you get out of the hole. You know what I mean? That's the whole thing. So you want to recruit maximal motor units, maximal action potentials to be able to, sync your body to perform that squat as much as possible. And a jump is essentially the same movements, your posterior chain, it's all hip extension. So if we can apply that stimulus through something of more of a speed, strength, or power method, where we're actually taking the body and performing plyometrics or depth jumps or any kind of jump training, that's going to support the lifter to go lift heavy. Now you're heightened. Your nervous system is in a heightened state, and it's being able to have that pop. And it's really that type 2. I mean, we could start going about type 2 fibers. There's many different areas, but if you just think about the nervous system alone, if it's heightened during a jump and you can get maximum recruitment, we can then transfer that over to the bar.
But as far as programming it is concerned, would you recommend like just doing it before, like on your warm-up sets? Like, how would you incorporate it? Would you just do like, a couple sets of box jumps and then you do all your warm-up sets, then you squat? Or would you kind of tie them in together where you do like a box jump, like 3 reps or something, then like you do a warm-up set?
Yeah, it depends on the phase, and I'm assuming you're referring to somebody who's trying to get maximal gains on their squat.
Yeah.
Okay. If you look up like old Russian training, some of those guys in the weightlifting who were some of the best, they would perform a lot of jump training either before or after. So it depends on what day you're focusing on. But complex training is essentially where you perform some kind of, you perform a squat, and then you take that strength, lift. You wait a little bit, and then you're looking for a post-activation potentiation, and then you're essentially transferring that heightened nervous system over to a bigger jump. I usually typically recommend that style, which is complex or contrast training, for somebody who's trying to get more power out of their jump, as opposed to somebody getting more power out of their squat. But if you're somebody who's getting wants to transfer over to the squat, I say heighten the nervous system before. So perform a series of 10 box squats building up to like basically a technical 1 rep max, and then go ahead and then now that you're heightened and your nervous system's pretty heightened, now you go to perform that squat and you feel, you're fired up basically. It'll definitely help. And not only that, outside of that's programming it, and that's outside of the benefits that you receive from being able to perform at that heightened state.
No, I have to try it for myself. Be honest, I never tried it, but like, I was just curious to know your take, and I think I'm gonna look into it. I'm for sure gonna try it out.
Yeah, if you want to increase your squat, and one thing that you're lacking is that speed component, and just getting out of the hole, being able to perform jump training, I think will 100%. Look, I've never gone for a powerlifting. I've done strongman shows. I've trained pretty high level. I mean, I was Elliot's training partner when he was doing his pro strongman days. Jump training was always something, being athletic and having some form of plyometrics was something we always had within our training. So I can't say for somebody who's, squatting over 800, to 1,000 pounds or something crazy like that, but I can say this. I've recently, before he passed away, Fred Hatfield, I spent a lot of time with him recently. He lives with us. He's Dr. Squat. He was the first guy to squat 1,000 pounds. Jump training was a staple in his program, and he performed that before he squatted.
For real?
Yeah. So, I mean, that tells you something.
No, that's it. Like, clearly, like, it's a time-tested thing, and people are still doing it today. Like, it's still relevant for a reason, So clearly there's some merit to it, So it's like, I think I'm gonna have to dig into it, but in case we got 2 more questions, then we'll pretty much just wrap it up, right?
Okay, sounds good.
This one's more for fighters, which is still on the performance side. Say someone wants to punch harder and kick harder.
Yep.
So what are some obviously besides technique, techniques is really important, but let's say in the weight room, what could someone do in the weight room to have a lot of carryover to the harder punch, harder kick?
So like you said, taking technique out of the way, short answer, you obviously generate force. It's a total body movement whenever you punch or kick. Majority of the time if you do it right. What I suggest is always having, being able to get really strong and powerful in your lower body. a lot of jump training, a lot of squats, a lot of compound lifts as far as that goes, because you have to generate force from the ground. So you're starting with your base. Once you're able to do that, you want to start to integrate movement. Along with, let me say this, along with training strength in your base, you want to create stability, and then you want to create rotational power. So your torso is what's going to essentially efficiently transfer that energy. So if I'm throwing a punch, it starts with the ground, but then that energy that is generated from the ground has to go up into my upper body. By doing that, it has to go through the torso. So I have to have great stability in my torso, so for lack of a better word, power isn't leaking. And I also got to have that really strong rotational power, so I'm integrated. So I have an integrated movement now. So I focus on training the lower body really, really strong, and then creating dynamic stability within the torso, and you know, creating rotational power, being able to perform rotational movements. Then the next phase that I would focus on is integrating the two. So performing some kind of strength with my lower body where I'm integrating some kind of rotational power. This could look like you know, some kind of lunge with a twist. This could look like some kind of ski jump with a medicine ball toss. Anything where I'm coupling power in my lower body and rotational force in my trunk is going to give you a harder kick or punch.
With something like that landmine twist, would that be in there?
Absolutely, yeah. Russian twists, I use those all the time, 100%. And I like, we were talking about it, complex or contrast style training for that. I like to perform like a landmine Russian twist and then go transfer that over to some kind of medicine ball ballistic toss where I'm performing some kind of rotational movement and throwing the ball. And with that, what you're going to see is it's mimicking, hey, I'm creating force out of my lower body. I'm transferring it over to my upper body to, you know, to rotate through my trunk.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so last question of the day, and then we'll wrap it up. This is more for like your athletes. So what are some ways that you, or some methods that you use to kind of motivate your athletes, you know? And I know that like some people will argue like your job isn't to motivate them, they should already be motivated, you know, they should just, your job should be to discipline them. But at the same time, like athletes, like they're not always gonna be motivated. They are gonna have like their off days where they're not really feeling up to it, you know.
Right.
So I personally think that as a coach, like you obviously have to discipline like your clients and your athletes, but there still is like a motivation factor in there. So what are some ways that you use to like kind of just like inspire them and just to be more of like a leader and just,
you know, I always say I mean, this is a loaded question. Let me first start off by saying, by any coach who thinks they don't need to have a motivational factor or be able to relate to their guys is not a good coach. And I say this because unless you're at a Division I college or something like that, and you know you're trying to get even then, you have to be able to relate to your athletes. I think the reason why what makes me so successful, let me tell you, there's bookworms out there that probably pick me apart on YouTube, and that's fine. I never said I'm the best technical exercise scientist there is. In fact, I probably have a lot of flaws. But I understand the general concept of getting the most out of my athlete each time that they step into there, and I can relate to them. I myself was an athlete. I know what was going through my mind, and I'm able to decipher what that athlete needs at that particular time. And you know, some days they come in and they're not feeling it, and really, this is going to sound crazy, but it's really on it doesn't sound crazy, but it's on an athlete by athlete, kind of like a case by case basis. Some athletes respond really well to positive reinforcement, and some respond well to negative reinforcement. So to give you a heads up, I work with two baseball brothers right now, and you know, not to say their name, but one responds to positive reinforcement. What's that mean? I know when we're doing drills that he sucks at, I'm trying to find the silver lining. I'm trying to find the thing that makes him tick or give him compliments about something he's doing right. Then I call it the cheeseburger effect, right? You got a bun, you got a burger, you got the other bun. I give them a compliment, This is for positive reinforcement. I give them the coaching cue that I want them to have, and
And
then
then
I give
another
them
compliment.
exactly. And that's with
Hmm.
somebody who has positive reinforcement. Now the other brother responds well to negative reinforcement. He's got a chip on his shoulder. He's the type like, tell me I can't fucking do it and I'm gonna go get it done. So he's like me. He responds like me. You talk shit to him, you get in his ear, you basically accumulate all that doubt he's faced his entire life, all that adversity he's faced his entire life, and you put that on the forefront. You bring back those memories. You bring up all those things of people telling them they can't do that, even if they're elite, because this kid's elite. So I gotta really dig deep into my box and find things that are gonna make this kid tick and make him feel like he can start to doubt himself, because that's what makes him work more. So I really believe it starts to, for me, coaching is just as much psychology as it is actually knowing the exercise science part of things. Because, like I said, I went to school with some brilliant kids, but because they can't relate to athletes, I feel bad for them. They'll never be a great coach. For me, as long as I'm applying the stimulus that I need to get them better each day, and we can continue to apply more stress to the body,
Hmm.
and I can do it in a manner where I can continuously support them and kind of recognize what's going to make that athlete tick. That's the route I like to say, which makes a great coach. And I'm not coining myself one. It's just I'm on the path to that's what I'm striving for. Isn't that all as a coach? I mean, we're not striving to be mediocre. I want to be the best
Of
performance
course.
coach there is. You know what I mean? That's the goal. It should be. And like I said, it's just a matter of deciding what that particular athlete, how they tick, positive or negative reinforcement. And once you find that out, you can really start to dig deep on them and get the most out of them each day. And I will say it starts with your energy. It starts with your energy. Whether it's positive or negative, it starts with your energy. You have to approach every single training session that you have for them, and you need to have your mind right. And usually if my mind's not right, even 5 minutes into it, I start cueing people and that energy starts to rise. Things could happen outside of there, but I don't really like to coach unless it's one of those where it's, hey, I'm giving my all to it at this time. So I won't take on a guy if I don't have that time and energy and effort to be able to give back to them, because I commit to them. That's what you have to do
Hmm.
as a coach. They're trusting in your abilities to bring them to a certain level. So how dare you not do that if you don't have that level of commitment, back into that?
No, I like that answer, especially the part where you're talking about you kind of have to be like a psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
It's not
Absolutely.
enough to just it's not enough to just be a bookworm and just know like what to teach. You
Oh,
have to know how to teach it, and you have to know like
exactly.
everybody's different, like you said. Some people it's more positive, some people it's more negative reinforcement, and it's like it's a skill. Not everybody's gonna develop it. And like school can't teach you that. You can't learn that in like a
100%.
classroom.
100%, man. And that's one of the biggest faults I see a lot of these young coaches have, is they can't relate to the people they're working with. You know what I mean? You got to be personable, and nobody teaches that. You know what I mean? You can read all the books you want, but either you're just going to be a researcher or a coach. And I like to mentor the young athletes. You know what I mean? Especially going through it.
Yeah, and I think it's something that just it's in you or it's not. It's kind of like how some people are just like
Absolutely. Yeah,
just
I
born
agree.
stiff. Like me, I'm a stiff
Yeah.
guy. Like I'll never be a good dancer. Like there's some things where it's like it's in you or it's not. And like
Yeah.
I feel like you have the background and you've already been through it. And you wanna help people and you don't want people to repeat the same mistakes you made. So it's like
100%.
yeah.
100%. Hell yeah.
Anyways, I know you got some athletes waiting for you right now, so I
Yeah.
guess we could wrap it up. But like, I appreciate you for taking the time, even though it's a short Q&A. I think the audience is really gonna appreciate it.
Hell yeah, man. And if I can ever support you guys in any way, I really appreciate it, Phil. I appreciate you having me on, man. I love what you're doing over there. And if I ever get up to Montreal, I'll have to come train with you, B.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
If you come.
Yeah. I'll be up there soon, man. I'll be up there soon.
Bring like a jacket because it's cold. It's
Yeah,
like
hell
minus
yeah.
30 right now.
Damn, see? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm living it up over here in 70, so we're all good.
70. Oh, fuck. Yeah.
For
You
sure.
Americans think we live in like igloos and stuff.
Pretty much.
Yeah. But
Uh,
anyways, bro, thanks a lot, man.
yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Peace.
Cool. Is that off?